It's Saturday the 14th of December. I'm Ciara Revens, and this was a week that saw Syrian rebels take charge in Damascus, Donald Trump take a trip to France, the healthcare CEO shooter go viral, and a new King of the Jungle crowned.
Grab a cup of something hot, put up your feet, and get up to speed on the 7 biggest stories of the week. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7.
It's news,
but not the news.
The last 7 days have seen a dramatic change in Syria as rebel forces stormed Damascus and declared the country free from more than half a century of al-Assad family rule. Led by opposition group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the rebels were met with celebrations as they entered the capital on Sunday morning following a stunning 2-week offensive which saw them capture several key cities on their way to Damascus. This was their announcement on Syrian state TV on Sunday morning.
With God's help, the city of Damascus has been liberated and the tyrant Bashar al-Assad has fallen.
Bashar al-Assad, the country's former president, reportedly fled on Sunday and sought asylum in Moscow. Meanwhile, Syrian PM Mohammad Ghazi al-Jalali said he's ready for a peaceful transfer of power.
This country can be a normal country, but we'll leave this matter to any new leadership that will be chosen by the Syrian people. And we're ready to cooperate with any new leadership and facilitate what they need so that various government departments can be transferred smoothly.
The weekend saw world leaders react to the news, including Joe Biden and Sir Keir Starmer welcoming the regime's collapse. But Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu was quick to take credit.
This is an historic day in the history of the Middle East. The Assad regime fell as a direct result of the blows we inflicted on Iran and Hezbollah, the main supporters of the Assad regime.
As the week unfolded, the story moved quickly, with former Syrian Prime Minister Mohammad Ghazi al-Jalali meeting with the head of the rebel forces HTS, Abu Muhammad al-Julani. Despite initially suggesting he would stay on, the PM handed over power to the rebel leaders, although he has been asked to help build a transitional government. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said it's a critical moment.
The situation is obviously very volatile. It is very good that Assad is gone, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what follows is settled by any means at all. It is really important we talk to our regional allies, our global allies, about the way forward, which has to be a political way forward.
Syrians have been celebrating and the roads to Damascus were jammed with returning residents, while video of prisoners being released from Assad's jails went viral. While the future remains uncertain, it seems likely that if the situation stabilises, many of the Syrian refugees who fled to Europe may return home. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper said the UK is joining Germany and other European countries in reviewing the next steps for asylum seekers.
We also have a very fast-moving situation, and that is why, like Germany, we have paused asylum decisions on cases from Syria while the Home Office reviews and monitors the current situation.
With the fall of Assad and his flight to Moscow, attention was turned to Russia and Vladimir Putin. It seems that the ongoing war in Ukraine, along with Israel's attack on Hezbollah, have overextended the Russian military, and the speed at which the Syrian rebels were able to overthrow Assad's regime may be ominous for Putin. Foreign Secretary David Lammy was pulling no punches on Monday.
Assad's demise is not just a humiliation to him and his henchmen. It is a humiliation for Russia and Iran. Vladimir Putin's attempts to prop up Assad for more than a decade. And all that he's got for this is a fallen dictator filing for asylum in Moscow.
Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Emily Thornberry, says the collapse in Syria also raises questions about the toll the war in Ukraine is having on Russia.
I think that he's having a much more difficult time in Ukraine than people realise. I think it's having a deep effect on their economy. You know, so many people have lost their lives. It is a real strain on the Russian economy.
Israel continued waves of airstrikes on key Syrian military locations on Tuesday with the intention of wiping out strategic stockpiles and limiting the risk of weapons falling into the hands of Islamic extremists. They've also targeted the Syrian naval fleet and are setting up a new buffer zone in southern Syria to protect the Golan Heights. The attacks came as the new Syrian rebel leadership spoke to Sky News in an attempt to reassure Western countries they have nothing to fear from the new government. In the US, President Joe Biden says his administration's Middle East strategy, including US troops on the ground in Syria, is paying off.
For the first time ever, neither Russia nor Iran nor Hezbollah could defend this abhorrent regime in Syria. And this is a direct result of the blows that Ukraine, Israel have delivered upon their own self-defense with unflagging support of the United States.
The aftermath of the Syrian Rebels' overthrow of Bashar al-Assad's government continued throughout the week as anger about the atrocities carried out by the regime continued to spread. There have been reports of summary executions of Assad's commanders and horrifying scenes discovered as prisons and detention centres have been examined. The mausoleum of Bashar al-Assad's father was set on fire on Wednesday as anger grows. At Prime Minister's Question Time, PM Sir Keir Starmer urged patience as the next steps for the international community become a priority.
The people of Syria suffered for far too long under his brutal regime. We've been talking to regional and global allies to ensure that it is a political solution and absolutely rejects terrorism and violence.
The focus this week from the government was on housing as Deputy PM and Housing Secretary Angela Rayner unveiled new planning reforms as the government doubles down on its goal to build 1.5 million homes by 2029. The changes would allow planning applications that meet local and national standards to skip council committees in an attempt to tackle the backlog. Angela also hinted at rolling back some environmental protections, claiming previous governments have prioritised wildlife over housing. She said people's needs should come before the safety of newts and other protected animals.
We can't have a situation where a newt's more protected than people who desperately need housing. What we need is a process which says protect the nature and wildlife, but not at the expense of us building the houses we need. We could do both.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer was critical of Whitehall last week in his speech to lay out the Labour milestones for change. He made reference to people who are comfortable in a tepid bath of managed decline as he set out his plans to supercharge the UK's government. That was clearly intended as a reference to the UK's civil servants, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're back to the bad old days of Dominic Cummings and the Tories vowing to dismantle the deep state of Westminster. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, was sent out on Monday to address trade union criticism of Starmer's remarks and to set out a more positive vision of how Labour intends to reform the state.
I'm not here today to talk about what lanyards people are wearing or to open up another chapter in the culture war. Those are just pointless distractions. I'm more interested in an answer rather than a grievance.
Chancellor Rachel Reeves had a busy week. Monday saw her in Brussels addressing the Eurozone finance ministers, the first time a British Chancellor has done so since Brexit. Then on Tuesday she announced a new plan to cut down on waste spending that might sound like, but is definitely not, austerity. She says that government departments are to be asked to find 5% efficiency savings in next year's budgets. It's part of a wider spending review which aims to look at priority spending that will get the UK closer to achieving Keir Starmer's 6 milestones for growth.
I have no doubt that we can find efficiency savings within government spending of 5%, and I'm determined to do so because it's through finding those efficiency savings that we'll have the money to spend on the priorities of the British people.
Tuesday also saw a new report from the Centre for Media Monitoring found that GB News is responsible for half of all news coverage of Muslims over the last 2 years and that most of it was negative in tone. The report says the channel's focus on Muslims was excessive, bordering on obsession, sparking calls for a review from regulator Ofcom. GB News' biggest star, Nigel Farage, was making headlines again on Tuesday as he announced that Holly Valance's husband, billionaire property developer Nick Candy, had defected from the Tories to join Reform. He was immediately appointed treasurer and he and Nigel set about trying to entice Elon Musk to go ahead with a potential donation to the party.
If Elon wants to give and it can be given legally, then of course Reform would be very interested in that.
Elon Musk is very supportive of what Reform is trying to do, and we've got good connections with him. Nick's got good connections with him as well.
He's messaged me this morning.
Farmers took to their tractors again on Wednesday, but not in fields, rather on dual carriageways and motorways across the UK as they protested against Labour's changes to inheritance tax. Hundreds of tractors were lined up at the House of Parliament as farmers hoped for a change of mind from the government on the new rules, which will see farms valued at over £1 million due to pay a discounted rate. It's proven hard for farmers to gain public sympathy when valuations start at £1 million, but protester Claire Fifield tried her best to make the case.
You might be asset rich, but we're facing the same cost of living crisis. If we sell everything that we have, we've got no business, we've got no income, we've got nowhere to live.
Former Tory leadership candidate Robert Jenrick and Shadow Secretary of State for Justice was quick to lobby on farmers' behalf.
They are the linchpin of rural communities and they deserve our support. There is still time for Rachel Reeves to change her mind and have a sensible approach where, yes, you do close loopholes for the super wealthy, but you protect ordinary farmers who are doing a good job for our country.
Oh, and if you thought the days of public sector strikes were behind us, you might have to think again. The Tory government became synonymous with strikes from junior doctors to train drivers and public servants. Once Labour took power, they settled many of the outstanding disputes, but a new pay proposal for 2025 may well spark further placard action. The initial offer of a 2.8% pay rise drew protests from unions and the British Medical Association. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood was cautioning that this is just the start of a process and the matter will be reviewed by public sector pay bodies. But Daniel Kibede, General Secretary of the National Education Union, says Labour are not delivering on their promises.
This government won an election on the slogan of change. We've heard Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer say repeatedly that austerity is over, but austerity is ended in deeds, not words.
The week wrapped up with Labour doubling down on their householding target, which they say will mean a priority for builders, an overhaul of the planning system so that new developments can move ahead more quickly. Deputy PM Angela Rayner is also Secretary of State for Housing, and she's optimistic that the target can be met.
We haven't built on this scale since the end of the Second World War in the 1950s. We were able to do it then, we can do it now. We just need all elements of the state, including local government, working with us, and I believe that getting that plan right will deliver the homes that people desperately need.
The Tories have described the plan to build at such a scale as a war on rural England and accused the government of planning to concrete over green belt land. Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook said the focus is on relieving pressure where the affordability pressure is most acute. But Shadow Housing Secretary Kevin Hollenrake says the government are ignoring local expertise in councils.
The decisions are effectively made by central government. So all that democratic accountability will have been swept away and the bulldozers will simply go in, pile in without you being able to say anything about it.
US President-elect Donald Trump doesn't take office for another month, but he's already got big plans. In an NBC interview on Sunday, he announced proposals to extend his first-term tax cuts, pardon some January 6th convicts, and end birthright citizenship, although he claims he's open to working with Democrats to protect so-called dreamers. He also squeezed in a trip to France this weekend for the reopening of Notre Dame, where he received a warm welcome from French President Macron.
It's a great honour for French people to welcome you 5 years later, and I remember the solidarity and your immediate reaction. So, welcome back again.
It's Trump's first international trip since November's election. While there, he held a 35-minute meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky about ending the war. But judging by his comments in the NBC interview, it doesn't seem Zelensky made much headway.
Should Ukraine prepare for less aid from the United States after you're sworn into office?
Yeah, probably. Sure.
After a week which has seen rebels take control in Syria, Israel continue attacks in Gaza, and Ukraine continuing to lose control as Russian troops advance. After a week which has seen rebels take control in Syria, Israel continue attacks in Gaza, and Ukraine continuing to lose ground as Russian troops advance. New NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was sounding a grim warning on Thursday. With Donald Trump due to take office in January and huge uncertainty about what America's relationship with NATO would be in 2025, Rutte says it's time for Europe to switch to a war footing. This means that NATO members should be prepared to increase their NATO contribution from the current 2% of GDP to 3%, and that the European defence industry needs to accelerate production of weapons and ammunition. Speaking in Brussels, he said we have a limited time window to take action.
We are not ready for what is coming our way in 4 to 5 years. Danger is moving towards us at full speed. We must face it. What is happening in Ukraine could happen here too.
After plenty of criticism over his decision to pardon his son Hunter, US President Joe Biden took action on other pardons on Thursday. He issued 39 pardons to Americans convicted of non-violent crimes and commuted 1,500 sentences. He's also pledged to issue further pardons before he leaves office in January. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's confirmed to Time magazine on Thursday that he intends to pardon non-violent participants in the January 6th insurrection. He was speaking to Time magazine as he celebrated being named the Person of the Year for the second time. To celebrate, he rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange and promised that his second term will be much more efficient than his first.
When we left, we didn't have any of these problems. We didn't have Russia with Ukraine. We didn't have inflation. We had no inflation. And we're going to do that again, but I think we're going to even up it because now we have experience that we didn't have. Now I know everybody.
The story of the assassination of healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has captivated American media for the last 2 weeks. The mystery shooter managed to disappear from New York despite a huge manhunt and massive media attention. But US police in Pennsylvania made an arrest on Monday night in a McDonald's on the main suspect. Police have identified the man as Luigi Mangione and said the 26-year-old was carrying multiple fake IDs, a handwritten document that police won't yet release, and a mask that is consistent with CCTV images. He also had what appears to be a 3D printed ghost gun. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro says the shooter is no hero.
I understand people have real frustration with our healthcare system, and I have worked to address that throughout my career. But I have no tolerance, nor should anyone, for one man using an illegal ghost gun to murder someone because he thinks his opinion matters most.
The shell casings found near the shooting appear to be engraved with the words delay, deny and oppose written on them, and investigations are looking into a possible insurance claim for a back injury suffered by the shooter as an underlying cause for the murder. Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says the subject of health insurance and anger at the companies is a real issue.
I think for anyone who is confused or shocked or appalled, they need to understand that people interpret and feel and experience denied claims as an act of violence against them. People go homeless over the financial devastation of a diagnosis that doesn't get addressed.
Still to come in the Standout 7, Formula 1 wraps up its season and a new King of the Jungle crowned.
Right after this. Welcome back.
The Department of Health and Social Care published the results of a wide-ranging survey on puberty blockers for under-18s this week. The treatment has proved controversial, and the responses to the survey from a wide range of organisations and individuals were 59% opposed. The concerns raised included a lack of evidence for the benefits and a concern about what is termed unsafe prescribing. The decision from the department is to proceed with a permanent ban on the medication for those under 18 who suffer from gender incongruence or gender dysmorphia. Health Secretary Wes Streeting was sympathetic but firm as he announced the decision.
The trans community is at the wrong end of all of the statistics for mental ill health, self-harm and suicide. I know it won't feel like it based on the decisions I'm taking today, but I really do care about this, and so does this government.
Sunday saw the last Grand Prix of the season in Abu Dhabi with the Constructors' Championship on the line. Max Verstappen had already locked up the Drivers' Championship, but Ferrari and McLaren both had a shot at the Constructors' prize before the race started. In the end, a strong drive from Lando Norris edged out Ferrari's Carlos Sainz, which was enough to seal the title for McLaren for the first time in 26 years. Reigning world champion Max Verstappen had a disappointing race, finishing P6 after a first-lap collision when McLaren's Oscar Piastri earned him a 10-second time penalty. Lando Norris was delighted to be able to secure victory for McLaren, calling it the perfect end to the season.
It feels incredible, not for myself, but for the whole team. The team have done an amazing job this year to come from where we were at the beginning. I'm so proud of everyone. It's been a lovely journey, and to end the season like this is perfect.
After weeks of grueling challenges, campfire drama and questionable meals, the I'm a Celebrity final finally happened. Sunday night saw Danny Jones, Colleen Rooney and Reverend Richard Coles battle it out one final time to be declared King or Queen of the Jungle. Dancer Oti Mabuse was the last person to be eliminated by public vote on Saturday, leaving it all to the three finalists, Colleen Rooney, the Reverend Richard Coles and McFly's Danny Jones. But there could only be one winner, and that was the man who has already won the Masked Singer and The Voice this year. Here's how the King was revealed.
The winner of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here 2024. And the new King of the Jungle is Danny!
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day. Give us 7 minutes, we'll give you the world.